You.
Fantastic.
Okay, and we are rolling. Um, I want to thank you so much for getting on here. I'm excited about some of the information we're going to be talking about, especially finances. This is something that people need to have an understanding on because you have a very faith-based perspective of finances. So, with that, let's just jump into it. What is
Okay.
the I guess to open it up, what is the easiest form of understanding finances that you can tell me before we get into the more complicated numbers and stuff? What is the easiest way you can explain finances to me and God's design for it?
God's design for finances, they are a necessity, but they're not something that God uh, believes that we should be focused on. Um, Finances, from God's point of view, is a way of actually testing us because it's through finances that is the only way that God says that we are allowed to test Him. So that's something that I find very useful in understanding God's view on money. It's like, well, He'll let us test Him, but at the same time, He's testing us in so doing.
Right.
So it's a very um, beneficial way of understanding. It's like, okay, this is how God looks at it. He wants to see if we can handle it. If we can handle it, He'll give us more. So,
Right.
and that's something that is that's kind of how God works in my experience in just about anything. Anything we want more of, we have to give it away.
Yeah.
So, which is a very basic principle, but it's like, well, that's one of the ways that the universe works. That's the way God set it up. So,
So, just a little backdrop story here for people that are going to be viewing this. So, you used to actually be an owner of a company at one point years ago.
yes.
How did that come about?
Well, I had been interested in getting into real estate investing. I had looked around at a number of different people, what they offered, how they did it, and I became aware of a law firm that all the owners of the law firm itself, all of the partners are real estate investors themselves. And that was something that I looked at the time. I thought I was interested in. Um, so I don't know. I started a company with them. I actually started a corporation and then had 8 companies across the country looking to do investments across the country.
Wow.
So, yeah,
And at the time, you were making, I mean, killer money that most of us would only dream of making.
it was good money. Yeah. So,
So out of that, because usually when we have some form of success, God has to take us back down to the valley, right?
right.
In some
Yeah,
form of shape. So your company or the business that you were doing essentially fell apart at one point.
it did. It because of a business partner, some things happened, and it everything came down. And at that point, I um, exited the company, shut everything down, and basically was at a point where I was like, well, I'm going to have to start over.
Right.
So, and I carried a fair amount of debt coming from that because some of the things that were going on, I was going to be able to cover the costs on it and everything else. But because some things did not happen when I had to shut the company down, it's like, well, some of those revenue streams stopped short
Yeah.
before they came in. So it was like, well, got a bunch of debt I got to deal with too. So, and I don't know, at one point I was over $500,000 in debt. And what best way to put it is I had an experience where I worked with somebody else who very much was a follower of God, but also understood a lot of things around the finances and about money. And
Yeah.
at that point, I kind of got I don't know, an itch. It was like, well, I got to get rid of all its debt somehow, fast. And that's what I did. And in about 2 years, I was able to eliminate all that debt. Got myself debt free, and it remains such. So,
That's awesome. That's awesome. I know for my viewers that'll in the future looking back. Um, and by the way, so for my viewers who are watching, I'm just going to say live that you can go to Twitter, you can go to Facebook, you can go to YouTube, my YouTube channel, and you can literally leave me comments in real time, um, and get in on the conversation that me and my cousin Derek are having. We're talking about money and what to do with money, and God's design for it. So anyway, after you went through all of that and you became debt free, you kind of had God kind of broke through to you on his kind of design for how money works and how to move money. And you said, and this has always stuck with me because I'm doing it now, actually, you said the biggest thing that you can do is actually give.
yes.
Can you explain that logic to me? Because I'm living it in my own life and I understand it, but for the sake of my viewers, how would you say, why would you, for instance, if people don't know this, why would you just throw money away to someone that if you're making money, you want to keep it, right?
Well, that's the thing. It's if we hang on to money, if we're hoarding money, it's a problem. Because everything that we have, we should be willing to let go of. Everything.
Right.
Which is hard because when you consider that, that means relationships, it means money, it means possessions, it means children if you have them, it means anything and everything you should be willing to give up for God if necessary, if God calls you to that. And people say, well, how can you say that? It's like, well, I remember somebody had their son on an altar, was about to
Yeah,
offer them up. It's like God does ask that sometimes.
he does.
It
Yeah.
doesn't mean he's going to, force us to go through with it, but he wants to see our heart.
Right.
And in seeing our heart, money, money is a stumbling block for many people. It's a trap. And it's one of those things that God says, look, you're going to need money just to survive in the world. That's the way it works. But 10% of that is mine.
Right. Right.
And a lot of people may have issue with that, but it's like, okay, God never changed that from Old Testament to New Testament.
Right.
That's never gone away. It's always been a test that God has for us, where it's like, look, money, it's tempting for us to say, well, I made all this money, it's mine.
Right.
And what people kind of misunderstand about that is the money you made, it came from God.
Right.
You're
Yep.
working for God. You have a manager, you have a foreman, you have whoever leads you, but they are a representative for God.
Yeah.
We may not have a heart for God, but they are the representative. And it's like, who does your promotion come from?
Right.
God Almighty. Who does your paycheck come from? God Almighty.
Right.
And, a lot of people don't see it that way. They say, well, no, my manager is the one who controls that. And it's like, yeah, but your manager, God sees what they do.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's like, if God has reason for it, I've seen friends that have leapfrogged over their own managers before. And it's like, well, they were being promoted, and obviously God had an issue with the manager and said, well, person you've been kind of treating this way, they're now your boss.
Yeah.
So it happens.
One of the things that God has been speaking to me as of lately about finances is freely you've received, freely give.
Yep.
And so I've started to think of it as like it's supposed to be when we receive, we give. It's supposed to kind of be flowing back and forth, if that makes sense, because God freely gives to us, so we should be freely giving to others. Freely we received, freely we give. And so, in today's society, people with inflation and, groceries going sky high and, rent going sky high, it God's people, it matters to him what they do with their finances because it shows him where their heart is exactly in those finances and how they're using it. And that's why the Bible says that the root of all evil is money.
Is the love of money.
Yeah.
Money is not evil. It's just a
Right.
tool. The love of money is a problem. It's otherwise known as greed. It's otherwise, you see people that hoard. You see people that do things. And it's like, well, those are just symptoms of that same issue.
Right.
Where it's like people aren't realizing it's like, okay, you're not giving credit to God for what he's given you.
Yeah.
And that's a mistake. It's like the next breath every one of us takes is given by God. Without it, we wouldn't have it. And it's like people are, I don't believe that. It's like, well,
yeah.
It's like we were given life to begin with way back. So
yeah.
And I don't know, my personal beliefs I've seen in Revelations where it talks about it, those that are coming against Israel, there is a time coming where that army will simply be slaughtered.
Right.
And it's like, okay, it's by the power of God. And it's like, well, what would it take for God to just say, you know what, every one of these people attacking, no more breath.
Yeah.
They would drop. That's it.
So, what are your thoughts on if people have, let's say, there's two different places of wealth accumulation. There can be savings, and then there can just be acquiring wealth, whatever it is, an inheritance, an annuity, whatever form of accumulating that wealth. What do you do with wealth accumulation? How do you get wealth accumulation? How do you get on that track?
To get to a point of wealth accumulation, you need to either have knowledge to know how to do it, because money is an idea. Money can be created out of nothing.
Yeah.
And that's something that for a lot of people, it's like, well, if money can be made out of nothing, then how come, I don't have more? Well, you've got to have the right knowledge to know how to do things.
Yeah.
And a simple example is, there's a corner lot, there's been a gas station there, but the gas station failed, and it's an empty lot now.
Mm-hmm.
An investor comes along, looks at it, and goes, you know what, I can do this with it, get it rezoned. The city rezones it. That investor turns around, he sells that same property he picked up for, say, $20,000, and he sells it for $120,000.
Yeah.
He's got nothing in it but a little bit of time and knowledge.
Yep.
And that's where, that type of thing can work. But as far as accumulation, my understanding of how to accumulate is first, you need to get your own finances under control. Because that's something that I think God looks at a little bit more than we realize. Because it's like, well, if you can't handle your own finances, why am I going to give you any more?
Right. No, that makes sense.
Yeah. Or otherwise,
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think what God looks at is, okay, are we being good stewards? A good steward is always the head and never the tail.
Yep.
And that, in this day and age, is a little trickier than most people give credit to it. Because a lot of people think, well, I'll just, I'll go buy a car and I'll take out a loan. And it's like, okay, that's one of the worst things you can ever do.
Yeah.
Which doesn't sound right, but it's like, okay, what have you just done? A car, because it does not produce income for you, it doesn't pay you every month. It's not an asset. It's a liability. It costs you money. You got to put gas in it. You got to maintain it. It's like it costs you money, and you just financed it, so you're paying interest on something that's costing you money.
Right.
It's costing you twice then. It's like, that's not a good thing.
Yep, you're right.
You buy a car, you want to get to a point, and I understand it's tough when you're young, you don't have the money, you're starting out, you don't have the money, you want to pay for a car, you just go buy one, you pay cash.
Yeah.
Cars are expensive. A lot of people don't realize it until they really look at it. Most people that own vehicles, when they sit down and look at it, they realize it may cost them anywhere from $500 to $1,500 a month
Right.
for a vehicle. So.
So one of the things that you had brought up to my family, if people want a starting point for what you and I are talking about, one of the starting points is a game that you had bought for us. I can't remember the name of it.
Cash flow.
Yeah, cash flow. Basically, in this game, it teaches you things like assets, annuity, credit, everything.
Yep.
Everything that you would need to know about money is found in this game. And I think, was it 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago was the first time that we actually got to see you again. And you had stayed with our family for a couple of days. And since then, you've made trips. But that was one of the games that impacted me, was to actually have somewhere simple with the concepts that you're teaching us. You not only were talking about it, but you gave us a starting point where the concepts could make sense to us as we're seeing it and playing a game, that now it's teaching us these different money habits. And so I would say, for people who don't know where to start, get this game, Cash Flow. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. You can get it, I mean, anywhere that games are sold. You can get this game. That's the easiest place to start, and it'll give you simple concepts that you can build on. And then there's also books that you can get to read, because everyone's in a rat race. Everyone is in this constant rat race of trying to make money, trying to pay your rent, people can get out of this rat race. It's just how you do it.
Right. Something about that game. The game itself is a little expensive because it is a teaching tool. I don't know. It's a, I don't know, the best way I've heard it explained before. It's a accounting degree, it's a finance degree, and it's an MBA all wrapped into one.
Right.
It's a game, so it's fun. You can actually play online for free.
Really?
If someone were to go to Google or whatever their search engine is and put in cash flow online, they would be able to find the game and be able to play for free.
Wow.
So, and it's playing online is interesting. You can play as a single player. You can have other people join you, so you can have multiple people play, and people can be from anywhere in the world and play.
Yeah.
I've had games that have gone on where I've had somebody from India play, somebody from, across the country here in the U.S. play, that type of thing, where it's like, it doesn't matter. It's like people can play from anywhere if they're just aware that you've got the game going. You let them know, and anybody can play.
Yeah. So with that, so one thing that I am doing, and I wanted to explain a little bit about my book, because it plays into some of these concepts. I have a book that will be coming out later this year, and a lot of the book has to do with chess and poker. Chess, it teaches you long-term strategy and long-term rewards. Because of that long-term strategy, it teaches you how to see things in real time as they're happening on the board. It teaches you how to see your opponent's strategy. And it teaches you how to preempt that. But it also teaches you, sometimes for long-term strategy, you have to take a risk. Not irresponsibly, but sometimes having a strategy, and we're talking about finances tonight, sometimes in your finances, you have to have a strategy that may look a little risky. But caution, you want to do that with responsibility. You want to do that with your eyes wide open. You don't just want to throw everything away. When I say a risk, sometimes money involves taking a risk.
Right.
Sometimes it's about wealth accumulation. Sometimes you'll take a risk for that. There's so many variables here. that
Mhm.
things can, sometimes you can get away with taking a risk, but you have to do it wisely. So then you
Something about risk. Let me interject for just 1 minute.
yep,
Something
yep,
about risk. As you learn things, when you're either investing or whether you're running a business, as you learn more, your risk goes down.
right,
And that's one of those things where it's like the only way you get your risk to go down is simply by gaining experience and gaining knowledge.
yeah,
Honestly, my advice to anybody, though, if they're going to do anything, it's like start small. Don't
right,
jump in with both feet. It's like start small and see how it goes, see what you can learn from it.
yeah,
If you make a mistake, it's a small mistake.
yep,
And it's like you can recover from that. If you go in, just full hog on it, it's like, well, now you got a problem if it
yeah,
didn't go the right way.
right,
And that's why you don't want to do that. It's like that's taking on too much risk.
yeah.
You're not managing it properly. So,
So the other concept in the book is you take the game of chess and then you put it with poker. Now, poker is you have I think 4 or 5 cards based upon which version of poker you're playing. You have 4 or 5 cards in your hand,
mhm,
and in poker you have to know how to identify what's in your hand because you can't play successfully if you don't know what kind of cards you're holding and how to
right,
play them correctly.
right,
You'll lose every time. And you'll
yep,
take risks that you don't need to be taking because you don't understand what you have in your hand. So
mhm,
the concept behind poker is that in this book, I'm teaching people how to identify what's in their hand. And then once you know what's in your arsenal, the tools that you hold, then you can start to understand how to play your hand correctly.
right. How to play to the most advantage.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So then when you couple those two things with, there's two other things that poker teaches you. It teaches you how to bluff your way to the top because sometimes you may not be holding all the aces in your hand.
Right.
You may have the worst hand of anybody at the table.
Hmm.
But if you learn how to watch people's facial expression and their demeanor, you can guess as to what they're holding in their hand if you study them very, very closely.
Right.
And sometimes, not always, sometimes you can get away with bluffing your way to the top to win that hand. Or the backdrop of this is, and this is not a weakness, this is wisdom. Sometimes to live to play another hand, you have to learn how to fold in a
Right.
round.
Yep.
It's more responsible and wise of someone to fold and live to play another round. Now, I'm going to take this even deeper than the physical expression of this is I'm talking about this in business terms. So I'm going to take it off of the physical terms into business. You have chess that's teaching you how to form your business strategy. You have your
Hmm.
king and you have your queen. Your king is going to be your your business uh, your biggest business asset
Hmm.
that you have to protect at all times.
Right.
Then you have your queen. That's going to be your capital. Your capital can move anywhere you want your capital to move. Just like the queen can move in either direction on a chessboard, your capital will always be able to move in any direction you want it to go.
Right.
So then you have your bishops and you have your knights, you have your rooks. That is going to be your um, what I call sub assets that you have within your company that you also want to protect at the same time.
Right.
And then you have your pawns, which are your employees that you can use in your company that protects, if you do it right, it protects your management system.
Hmm.
but it also protects your biggest asset in your company, and it protects your capital.
Right.
Again, it goes back to money. I can link the same thing back to poker. You have your chips, you have your cards, and if you're playing with cash, that's your capital. Chips would represent this aspect either assets or stocks.
Right.
Both of them are assets that you would have in a company or that you would have personally. And then you have cash, that's your capital. So then with your cards, you have to play your cards according to one, the capital, and your assets in what you have with you. So all of this goes back to money. So this book is it's focused on the money, and it's focused on how to negotiate a business deal correctly. One of the things you told me a couple of years ago when you and I had lunch, you told me you could literally go and acquire a property and put nothing down on it if you do it right.
Yes. You can still do it today.
Explain that to me, because that's an interesting concept that I don't think people have really thought about.
Well, one of the easiest ways to do it is to do it with an apartment building. And the reason an apartment building, rather than say a house, for example, a house, a bank is going to look at your personal finances. With an apartment building, the bank doesn't care about your finances because they know you're not paying for it.
Right.
The tenants that live there, it's the cash flow of the property itself that's going to be able to pay the mortgage or not pay the mortgage. So a
Yep.
bank at that point is looking at a property as a business going, okay, well, how does this business cash flow? Does it cash flow enough to pay the bills? Does it cash flow enough to pay the taxes? Does it cash flow enough to cover the management, to cover the maintenance? It takes a bank is going to look at all these things and go, okay, well, if the property is the right property, it's got, good bank, it's got good tenant rolls, everything else, it's coming in, payments are being made on it, it's, generally full, the bank's going to go, yeah, that's a good one, make a loan on that.
Right.
And the thing is, you can be the one who is actually buying the property, probably through a company of some sort, not on your own, credit, not on your own name either, because if anything ever happened in that property, heaven forbid, they'd end up coming to you to sue you then. So you don't want your name necessarily on it. You can control it, but you don't want your name, appearing on it. But that's the type of thing. You have a company that you purchase the property with that company, and then the company will help provide some protections for you, legal, and some protections as far as anonymity as well.
Yeah.
So
So what are your thoughts on investing? And I know we're talking about a version of investing, but let's say that you want to invest in stocks or a company or different forms of investing. Is it wise? The first question is it wise to invest? And I'm going to put this in general, but we're going to get down to some of the core things. Is it wise to invest at all?
absolutely. If we take a look at what God said about talents, a lot of people don't understand what talents are. Talents was a form of money.
Right.
And we have the parable of the talents. One had 10, one had, I think, 5, one had 1. And it's like, well, and that's not exactly right, I'm sure. One had 5, one had 3, one had 1, something like that.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening was the one that had 5 went out and doubled it. The one that had 3 went out and doubled it. The one that had 1 buried it, did nothing. And God blessed and congratulated the first 2. The third one, God called evil because they did not do anything with what they were given.
Right.
And that right there tells me something. It's like, well, what does that mean I should be doing?
Right. Yeah.
If I'm not doing anything, that's bordering on being evil. It's like,
Yeah.
well, I probably should be doing something. So well, let me go out and learn about these different ways to invest. Let me learn first how to get out of debt, because that's one of the greatest investments anyone can make.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, how can you say that? It's like, well, what's the interest rate on, say, your credit card? So if you have a credit card and it's running at 26%, stop paying the interest on that, and you get a 26% return for yourself.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a good return.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
Even the percentage is a good return.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and there's ways to do that. I mean, it's real simple. I can share that even. It's like if people have debt and you're trying to get out of debt, if that's something that makes sense to you, it's like, well, line up your debts, write them down on paper, how much you owe on each one, what your minimum payment is on each one, and basically you look at it and you go, okay, put them in order. Which one do I owe the least on? Let me put that at the top of the list. I'm going to make minimum payments on everything else. Make the bare minimum that they'll allow me to do, and not be in default. But let me do that, and then any extra I've got, let me go after that smallest one. And the whole reason is you get it paid off. You get that one paid off, and maybe you've been paying it off for the last 12 months, but you do this and you go, wow, I could pay it off in 3 months, and
Right.
it's gone. And now at the end of those 3 months, what you've got, that payment that was going to that, you can just add that to the second one.
Yep.
And you're going to pay that off faster. And what ends up happening is it snowballs, it speeds up the process. And just about anybody in this country, even people that have got homes, everything else, this is one of the things that's absolutely nuts to me. If you own a home and you get a 30-year mortgage, most people with their finances could actually pay it off in less than 7 to 10 years.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Because that's the way the system is set up. It's just most people don't know that.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where it's like, if that's really the case, then why are all these people doing all these other things, and they're taking so long to pay off their houses, or living in it all these years, and they struggle to get through it, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
And it's like, well, you've been deceived by the world. So.
Yeah. So investing wise, what would you say to people who do not have good credit? What do they do then? What's the best mode of option for them?
If they don't have good credit, first of all, pay off your debts. Get those gone. While you're paying off your debts, learn about different investing avenues. And what I mean by that is learn about stock investing, learn about commodity investing, learn about option investing, learn about real estate, learn about oil and gas, learn about precious metals, learn about the different things. And it's like, well, where do you learn that? It's like, you can go online and learn about something like this.
Right.
But what I would say, and the reason I say look at all, potentially look at a bunch of these different things, it's like, well, figure out who you are and what you're interested in doing.
Yeah.
I realized in the real estate that wasn't my highest calling. And that's why when I closed it down, it was like, I think this was God's move to have me do this, because this wasn't going to be the right thing for me.
Yeah.
I got out of it, and what I've found since then is real estate investing. I can actually do, or stock investing rather, in the stock market using stocks, options, and using things like REITs. I can actually do my real estate investing right through the stock market.
Right.
And I can also trade stocks and trade with options. The options scare a lot of people, but options, in my opinion, are a lot safer than the actual stocks are, for various reasons.
Right.
Stocks, you potentially have unlimited loss. With an option, if you are the one who is controlling it, and there's always a control, and who has the obligation and who has a right. It's the one with the obligation, they actually have the control on it. with their position, what they can end up doing is they can guarantee I will never lose more than X amount, ever.
Right.
So you have limited losses using options, where stocks, you can't do that. And with an option, I can have unlimited upside, the same as a stock would have. But I have a limited loss, whereas a stock has unlimited loss. And that's where it's like, it's built into options already. They're safer vehicles. You
Right.
just need to learn how they work. They've got some funny names around them and some funny terminology. But once you get past that and you realize how, what they are, how they work, it's like, well, these are simple. It's just, it's like a contract.
So let's say something as easy as let's say Starbucks or Walmart or AT&T. Where, if I didn't know anything about stocks, where would I start with something that I could say I can research? That where do I start?
Okay. If you're learning, if you're wanting to learn, something I would do if you're looking at stocks, where would I suggest? So there's a couple of places that I would kind of recommend, because there's a couple of different things you can do in the stock market, and that's I think part of why I have kind of been directed towards that is because there's so many different opportunities. There's a law firm called Anderson Law Group. They're out of what is it, Nevada. But they actually have, on the weekends, they do a free all-day webinar on Saturdays, about once a month anymore. And that's something that years ago, I went to those. I went to several of them, just to understand some of the terminology and the way they did things, because the way they did it is very successful. It's very solid, the way they make money with it. And that was something that I just, what is that called? It's infinityinvesting.com, I believe. So if you were to Google that, or do a search on that, you'll find it. Infinity Investing. But the infinity investing, it gets into a principle where it's like most people don't realize they don't actually want to be rich; they just want to be free.
Right.
And that's something that most people, that's what they really aspire to. Is it's like I'd like to just be financially free. I'd like to be able to do things when I want to and not have to worry about it.
Right.
So. Infinityinvesting.com, though, is where I go first. They've got some really good information, and they teach what the wealthy around the world, probably the top, 2% of the world, how they invest in the stock market. So it's a very safe, very solid, method. There are ways to get higher returns than that, but
Right.
you also take on more risk. And with that, it's like, well, if you know how to manage the risk, go for the higher returns.
Yeah.
So, but that's something that you don't want to do right away. It's like learn something that's basic, that's simple, but it still makes good money, really good money.
Right.
There's other things that you can invest in too. If people are more interested in real estate, Google tax lien sales.
Yep.
Because that's something that most people don't realize. That's where the banks, the insurance companies, a lot of hedge funds, pension funds, that's where they invest their funds.
Yeah.
And the reason they do is because they're guaranteed.
Yep.
And it's like, well, what do you mean they're guaranteed? It's like the county guarantees you will get that money. It's actually the state that guarantees it, but it's, managed through the county. It's managed by every county in the country.
Yeah.
In their jurisdiction. But the tax liens are really good, because it's like a lot of times you can get properties for 10, 15, 20 cents on the dollar. So you get a $100,000 property, you might pick it up for $15,000.
Yeah.
So, and then it's yours.
Yeah.
There's no mortgage. There's no. It's like it's yours. Now you got to start paying taxes on it, but it's yours.
Yeah. But all of this goes into the grand scheme of, I mean, there's a way that money is supposed to work. And,
Mhm.
the reason that part, not all, but part of the reason why this country is in debt is because not just the government, but I mean, the way that Americans spend money is
Mhm.
so outrageous and out of control. And they don't know what to do with their money. They just go crazy when they have it, you
Right.
know, and that's part of the debt that our country has incurred. Because a lot of news channels would like to say, well, it's our government and it's this president, it's that president. That's part of it. That's a fraction of the reason. But there's also the reason that Americans have driven this country into the dirt by the way that we have been living financially,
Yes.
because we don't understand how it's supposed to work.
Right. Most of the country, from what I see, most of the country is redlining. They're very close to. If something were to happen in their life, financially, they'd crumble.
Yeah.
They're very close, to that edge where it's like, okay, you're running it so close already. And what it's human nature. It's like whatever we have, we tend to spend. So that's why you have somebody who makes, 25,000 a year, and you have somebody who makes 250,000 a year, and they're both broke at the end of the month.
Yeah.
They both have the same problem. They don't understand how to manage it properly.
Yep.
And it's kind of scary. It's like, okay, there's people that make 25,000 a year, 250,000 a year. There's people that make 2.5 million a year,
Yeah.
and they still don't know how to manage it.
Yeah.
And then there's other people that, there's somebody who makes 15,000 a year, and you know what? They do know how to manage it, and they're doing just fine. And
Yeah.
it's like, how is that possible? Somebody who's making 250,000 a year, they go, how is it that this person doesn't have any debt? How is that even possible?
Right. Yep.
But
So one of the other things that people should invest in, I'm learning it myself right now. I've been doing the research on it. Is one of the most important things that every American should invest in is their retirement home.
mhm,
That's one of the most important things that you can do as a person. You get into your later years, and
right,
what you retire on is what you've put away for all those years.
that's the old plan. That's the old plan. Save $1 million and live off of that $1 million in your retirement. That's Wall Street's idea. What works best, from what I've seen, is accumulate enough money that off of that you can invest it. You've got it in assets that are just simply paying you what you need to live on.
Yeah.
And then that way you're not drawing off of what you have. And that's something, because what most people are trying to achieve, and this is what I was getting at earlier, is most people don't want to be rich. There are some that do want to be rich. Good for them, because we need those people.
Right.
We need Elon Musk's. We need people like that. We need Bill Gates, because they create some incredible things for us.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like we need people like that. But at the same time, it's like, well, most people, what they actually want, if I had enough passive income, passive being I don't have to work for it. If I had, say, $10,000 coming in a month and I didn't have to lift a finger to do that, I'd be good. Most people would agree with that.
Yeah.
Not everybody. Some people, their thermostat, if you will, is a little higher, where it's like, well, I need 25,000 a month, because that's how they live.
Right.
So,
So the next thing, I was just gonna go quickly. Like for me, it doesn't make sense for people to invest in a boat. I know people who their dream is, I'm gonna, get a boat, and I'm like, the boat is not out of assets. You should be able to have money coming out of those assets, not putting your money into something that's never going to create money. A boat is never going to create money.
Not unless you can put it out for rent or out for hire for something, as a fishing boat or something.
But owners of boats don't. That's not something we hear every day where they're renting out their boats. They usually will buy one, and it's just something that they have in their family line.
Right.
And for me, it's like,
It's a luxury.
why would you do that? Why that? For me, it's like I'd rather find something to where, let's say I buy land or I buy, an apartment complex or
Mhm.
something that at the end of the day is going to bring in money instead of me putting out money and it's just going to sit there for the rest of my life.
Right.
It's not making me money in the process. That's something that I think a lot of Americans need to process through, is doing finances in a whole other way where they don't need to invest in something that's never going to create money at the end of the day.
Right. This is something that a lot of the wealthy teach their kids. The only thing your money is for is to buy more assets. That's it.
Yeah.
And the reason they're taught that is, well, if all you buy is assets, assets produce income.
Yeah.
So if you buy something that's going to produce income, well, you buy enough of those assets, you can have that boat. Because the boat will be paid for by the assets.
Yeah.
And now not only do you have the boat, but you also have the assets that are still producing money even after you bought the boat. So it's
Yeah.
like a much better position to be in. It's like, just buy assets. There's a certain amount you've got to have for living expenses. Everybody's got to have some. But once you cover that, you just start buying assets. You don't buy liabilities. Cars are liabilities. Boats are liabilities. Houses are liabilities.
Right.
It's like they all take money out of your pocket every month. It's like buy something that puts money in your pocket. It's rental properties. It's stocks that pay dividends. Things like that. There's things out there that, they pay. You can buy a tax lien. It'll pay you. It'll be the end of the year, the end of whatever cycle. But it's like you'll get paid.
So to bring all of this home, because I don't want to leave people with their minds spinning after all of this information, how do you invest in the kingdom of God? And I'm not talking about in a religious way. How do we take everything that we've been talking about finances? The final thing that I want to bring home tonight is, with money, how do you invest in the kingdom of God? How do you do that in a responsible way?
You tithe. You give 10% away. If you do it directly as God says, it goes into God's storehouse so that there is food in his house.
Right.
I believe to a very large extent, God accepts if we are freely giving, as long as it's going towards what one would consider maybe a good cause, helping those that are homeless, helping those that can't help themselves, doing that type of thing. It's like if you're giving towards something like that, God sees that. He knows our heart.
Right.
And it's one of those things. It's like, well, are you willing to part with 10% of it? That's all that I ask for. That's all that God is asking for is I want 10%. Prove to me you can, you're free of its grip and you're willing to let it just go.
Right.
And that's something that I did long ago. And every month I give 10% of everything I make away. And I've never suffered because of it. It doesn't mean that things haven't been tight sometimes. I would say, but it's one of those things where it's like, well, I still have a job. I still have good health. I still have everything I need. So. And that's something that, through I don't know, very lean times even, I would tithe, and God saw me through. So.
Right. So the thing that I would say is, with the encouragement that you've given me over the last couple of years financially, in the conversations we've had, one of the things that I started doing is I started really going to the Lord with my finances, saying, God, how do you want me to start to form my finances the way that you desire my finances to go? I want to be within your agenda with how you want my finances to look. And one of the things that God said to me is, usually my checks are a little over $400 every week. And so I give 200 to my mom, and then I usually have about 230 left. And what God started to tell me is, I want you to give all of it away.
Okay.
I don't want you to keep it. I want you to just give it. And I'm like, how is this supposed to work? Like, I have to get stuff for myself. I have to, And so what I did was I divided what was left of the check that I had, and I've started giving 200 to a friend of mine who lives in Seattle. He's been going through some tough things. So my mom had talked to me about it, about giving and finding ways to give. And I was like, you know what, this is good ground. He's always been a really good friend. And so I started giving him money. And I was giving him 200. Everything that I had that was available to me, I started giving it directly to him. And then I would keep, $30, $40 to, get things like, if I need to get drinks or food or, things I needed for work or whatever, I would keep it within that $30 to $40 radius. And as I've done that, there's things that God has revealed to me since then about how his kingdom works. And so one of the concepts of not just investing, not just giving, is when you give, God will give back to you, even if it's not the physicality of what you've given in that moment. There's so much more that he can reveal that may not be monetary in some moments, but the revelation and the grace that he gives you upon your life and favor is more than you could ever match what you're giving.
Absolutely.
And I found that to be true in my own life. I mean, even over the last couple of months, I've had more favor with my bosses at my job than I've ever had. I've had more revelational foundation from the Lord on some things that I've never had. And learning that my finances don't belong to me. That's another concept that people don't understand is there's money is a tool, like you said, but it's not yours.
It's something that you are to be a steward of.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. The moment we say it's my money, you failed.
Yeah. Well, you're misguided at that point.
Yeah. And so once you learn this isn't mine, it's money that can go into the storehouse of the Lord for him to use to bless other people. Once you understand that your finances belong to him and you do according to what he asks you and tells you to do with it, and he's never going to be a harsh God. He's never going to be a mean God. Everything he does is for your good. And so even money can be used in your good for yourself in ways that you wouldn't even realize it. You just have to come to the table as far as when God speaks, this is what I want you to do with this. There's a reason he's telling you to do that, and it's for your good. That's at the core level of it. Anything God will ever ask you, he is always abundantly, exceedingly good.
Mm-hmm.
So everything that he asks you to do, it's not it will never be in an interest of you being a horrible person. He's expanding your faith to see beyond where your human eyes can see. But he's always going to tell you things based upon he is exceedingly and above and beyond. He's good.
Yes.
So when you step into that place of the fact that he's good, you taste and see that the Lord is good. even your finances are going to reflect the goodness of God in your obedience.
Yes.
That is the foundation. That is why money is a tool. Is because even though there may be moments where the monetary reimbursement might not come back to me, but in other areas in my life, it's more than matched what I've given. And it's because God is always good. The foundation of all humanity is that God is always good. He is wanting to expand your faith. He's wanting to, what the Bible says is to look unto the hills for where my help comes from, the maker, the Lord of heaven and earth, right? When we give, it's literally taking our eyes off of ourselves right here, the horizontally, and all of a sudden we're now looking up, because now we have to realize I no longer have the money in my hand that I just had. What do I do now? So you can no longer look here, you have to look here. And so it's one of those things that, money is a tool, but within all of that, the way that God orchestrates it and the way that God says, I want you to distribute it this way, at the end of the day, God is always exceedingly good.
Good.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna end it right here for the night, because I think we've thrown out a lot of good nuggets. But in the next couple of weeks, we'll have you back on so we can follow up to some of these things that we're talking about. But thanks for giving me your time tonight, Eric, and we'll do it again.
Yep, sounds good, Joe.
Have a great night.
All right, you as well. Thank you.